Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at Jack Straw Cultural Center for the New Media Gallery Artist Talk with Romson, Regarde, Bustillo to talk about his installation currently here in the gallery, which you can visit for another week. So if you're joining us online, you can come by and check it out. You have another week. There is also a youth and family art making workshop next Saturday, the 14th, that you can sign up for. You can email education@jackstraw.org to find out more about that. My name is Levi Fuller. I work here. I manage the artist residency programs at Jack Straw. We have 3 artist residency programs: the New Media Gallery, the Artist Support Program, and the Writers Program. And applications for our next year of programs are actually open right now. So if you're interested, if you are anybody that makes any kind of art that makes any kind of sound, you should check out our website or our submittable, jackstraw.submittable.com, and you can see the applications there. And you too could be here presenting an artist talk in our studios and presenting an installation in our gallery. I do want to take a moment to mention that we're meeting on the lands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot nations and other Coast Salish peoples, past and present. The staff, board, and artists of Jack Straw Cultural Center acknowledge that we're living, creating, working, and playing on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle and the Salish Sea, and we honor them and the land itself with deep gratitude. And I also want to thank our wonderful technical team here. Zios and Aisha have gotten us up and running and gotten everything connected and made it so you can see and hear us here in person and hopefully out there. And I also want to thank the folks that fund these programs: City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, For Culture, Washington State Arts Commission, Arts Fund, the Lester and Phyllis Epstein Foundation, and the National Endowment for the Arts, and individual contributors. We always appreciate any type of donation that anybody wants to give us at any time to support these programs. With that, I will hand things over to Romson. Thanks for being here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I am super appreciative. Maraming salamat, Jack Straw. Thank you so much, Jack Straw, for working with me over the past year to record sounds that I will go through the beginnings of that creation, and for supporting the development of my work. So this is a very informal talk. I have some images I'd like to share about my work that pertains to, everything tied to this exhibit, Proximity Modifier, and also to the general direction of my current work. So we'll start out where it started, where things start, which is with my family. The first image that you see on the screen here, by the way, please don't hesitate to give a signal, raise your hand, ask questions during the presentation. All right, so this is my family, 1978. We came to the United States, specifically to the Pacific Northwest, to Seattle, after, I believe my mother said, 9 years of application process. We had relatives here from colonial times when the Philippines was very much linked, colonized by the United States. And over time, members of our family, through various means, migrated to the Seattle area. Others also moved to Las Vegas, to California, and others to Canada. We're originally from Mindanao Island. These are my parents. On the right there, you'll see my mother. She has been a point of inspiration for me as a fabric artist and as a person who's persevered through many changes in one's life. The same goes for my father. That's an early artwork there. My father, Papa as a datu. Datu is a term for a person of status on our island on Mindanao. And I have all this text here that I will not read. But that is an image of my Lola Pinay. So we are from the island of Mindanao. On our matrilineal side, my grandmother, Delfina, is from the Dapitan Dipolog area. And I'll show a little map describing what that is, or excuse me, where that is. Just for reference, this is our island there with the red arrow in the Philippines, relative to the rest of Southeast Asia. And this is the general area where my family are from on that island, which is the northern part of Mindanao. And this area has, for many reasons, and is predominantly of the Bisayan-speaking ethnicity, which is what I belong to. In the United States, I have been very fortunate to have worked with a number of artists that have helped develop who I am, and I'd like to acknowledge two of those persons, and that's Marita Dingus, who's been my mentor for many years. It's one of the reasons I'm a printmaker, is her introduction to that art form by taking me to Pratt Fine Art Center here in Seattle. The gentleman, Drake Decknatal, is the late painter Drake Decknatal, who passed away several decades ago. He was a beautiful artist who welcomed many of us young artists in the 619 building, which is in Pioneer Square, which is where I first started producing artwork with the idea that that would be the direction of my life. This gentleman here is from Oaxaca, Mexico, Shinshiburo Takeda. I met him later in life, and he has also been through his art, and I would even say more so through the way he has built a community around him in Mexico of printmakers, been a great influence and point of inspiration. So to the art. So I am a studio artist that has a strong background in education and as a teaching artist. So I've worked with different communities. This is a project I collaborate with Marita Dingus, where we made these figures, these dolls, with found objects, which is Marita's very well known for, with Hmong in the Mien community in South Seattle at Asian Council and Resource Services many years ago. I bring this up because all of this has influenced the way I share my work, who can read the work, who might find themselves in the work, and how one might feel a degree of belonging when they are in the space that I make. And with that in mind, these are some of the artists that I consider very much family. Very few of us get through these the challenges of being an artist without support. So I'm very fortunate to have a group of artists that are within my circle. So to the artwork. This work is our prints. They are a combination of works on paper and fabric. The one on the left is titled My Mother Puts Away Her Colors. The title has to do with exactly that, what one has to do to find their place in the world. And for many immigrants, they often have to put things away for a time in order to move forward in their new environment. Whether they are able to pick those things up again is dependent on a few things, but the idea is that they are not gone. They are put away for the moment. This is part of the exhibit that those pieces were included in. The dancer there is David Rue. He is originally from Liberia, and our dialogue informed the presentation of the work and the intervention that involved the folks that you see behind there. A little bit of my work, my past work. This is a series of large collages which are now at the, what is the football stadium called now? Lumen, yeah, Lumen Station. And this There's a number of important reasons I'm including this work. One of the is one of the first public art pieces I ever did, and frankly, the compensation allowed me to travel around the world to find, I would say, to allow me the time and the space to find more about who I am and what is the reason for making making the work that I do now. Certainly there are beginnings, but appropriately that these are boats. It began the journey to, frankly, a more global exposure outside of what I call duress. And we can go back to that later on. And you can't miss it. When you go to the Lumen Field Stadium, if you see someone that looks like me on the wall or my siblings, that would be the artwork. It's a little close up. So now we're moving to the installation part of the work that I do, or what sometimes I refer to as interventions. This was an exhibit at the former Immigration Center in the International District, Chinatown. And much of the imagery and the reflection there reflects what I thought at the time, what I felt, the experiences of people who were incarcerated for intents and purposes at this center, which is also, interestingly enough, the place where I received my American citizenship. This installation is closely related to the work here in that it happened fairly close to my residency in Bali, Indonesia, at Bali Purnati, where there was a deep dialogue with my place of birth, Mindanao Island in the Philippines, the time span between the separation of our cultural heritage from that of the southern part, our southern neighbors, which is the Malaysians and Indonesians. A connection I've always felt, and was given the opportunity to dig deeper into that work. And part of that connection to me was the integration of space into all aspects of artwork, including things that we may not be considered an artistic experience. So here there's a portal, actual and literal and metaphysical portal, which includes elevators that travel up and down the floors of this office space, which is one of the Amazon buildings in Bellevue. You're welcome to ask questions. I can barely actually see you, so you may have to say, hey. Anyway, I'm being silly now. These are my initial forays into working with glass, which is etching on glass. And as you can see, there are patterns there that are somewhat identifiable. A significant amount of work contains images that are readily available or translatable to certain groups, and maybe less so to others. So what might seem abstract would have a clear imagery for others, and that is deliberate. And that's tied to an experience I've had, and many of us have had throughout our movements around this planet, when we end up in different places and we have to translate or are expected to translate, and then others may not have to navigate that necessarily. And the work continues to progress. So now this work is tied to more public spaces. So my near goal has been to, my goal, and what I've had some success to a degree, is to create these works, these interactions in more public and permanent situations. So here there are images and colors and compositions that, again, might be more readily available to others, and then for others to discover what they may see in the artwork. This is the Summit building extension of the Seattle Convention Center. All right. Yes.
Can I ask? Oh my gosh, what was I gonna say now? If, is it a narrative? I mean, could you go down a column or a cross and it would tell us, the figures would tell a story?
It's
A literal
possible.
story or just
That is a good question. The question was, could you go down the column or part of the work and it would tell a story? Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. Interesting sound. The answer to that is each motif or icon has the potential to be interpreted. I can maybe, for example, there are three images of a human figure standing above three different boats within this particular installation. And I should say that some of these motifs are in the artwork here at Jack Straw and are tied to the poetry that we're recording. So they're all tied to the idea of proximity and fire, before I forget to say that. So those three motifs and icons, or combinations of, I should say, one is an outrigger. Another has the lines that might be more representative of a Pacific Northwest Native American boat. And then another one has the outline of a more general idea of a canoe. So within those images, one might identify a distinct story. And then within the images also, there are different kinds of hats and or facial features. So a hat might reflect a salakot, or like a Southeast Asian cone hat. And then another, to someone else actually, it might be more of a PNW, Pacific Northwest hat. So the understanding is that folks can find different narratives according to their references.
right.
So within that, you carry the story that you carry, and if you're willing to, you'll see other stories. Hopefully that answers the question to a degree. Yeah. For example, here, the blue there is a good example. So within the blue, I'll just say for me, there are birds, and there's a paddle, and there is an ubi plant. So the ubi's on top, the paddles become the bird eyes, and the mouth is the beak of the bird. Right. Someone else might find something different in that. And that's tied to, at the risk of expanding to another place of the artwork, that's tied to ikat and fabric art making, where there are these somewhat abstracted images that clearly for the creator is an actual thing. References an actual thing.
3D glasses to look at this at your artwork?
No, but it's interesting you say that. I just saw some artists who did that. No, but the significance of that question is you are supposed to see something if you look at it. It is meant to separate the colors also. So your brain is supposed to do it there at some point, and that's tied to some degree the purpose of these materials, the fabric materials in certain cultures, which is to meditate. So if you look at at this wall, which is a significant wall, it's a fairly large wall, it will extend and expand and go into several depths depending on your focus of on what color or what shape you're focusing on. At least that's the intent, which is not unlike many of the glasswork in monumental buildings, stained glass windows that we find in places of worship. This is Miguel trying to fix things. And aren't we always trying to fix things? And the work that is here at Jack Straw is considering how we address things like decolonizing, things like personal trauma, things like cultural flux, if that needs to be fixed, landing points, and what that takes of us, out of us, and what it gives us within the same genre of work. An installation that was done at Image Island Museum of Art you'll see that the shadow mask that in front of me here was partly installed here, there. I'm showing this also to share that much of the work I do is accumulative, so it goes into other things. They are either redone or they are purposed with the idea that each time they are presented, they gain more energy, or some people say power. Some folks consider the idea of the use of a thing is when it actually gains its potential to make change. And there are many metaphors involved with that idea and statement.
What's the bed for? The bed frame?
The bed frame. So the bed frame has traveled with me. I still have that bed frame. It is very difficult to move around with. It is stored right now in my studio, taking about a third of that space. The bed frame is an area where a person may activate the space or perform, if you will. Again, there are many reasons behind that. For others, it may just be that, a platform to activate that's a bit more raised from the audience. For others, it may signal an understanding of how many of us came to be during the colonial process, which has to do, quite frankly, with the subjugation many times of our women and of our culture, and oftentimes that was done in violent ways, and that the place of sleep in bed was part of that. This image, this is a close-up of one of the pieces there. This is called karon, which it means today in my language. So I play quite a bit with language, the different languages that I'm exposed to. Some of them I'm closer to than others. I am actually no longer fluent in my own native tongue, Bisaya, and the artwork and the titling of work helps me reestablish that connection to the language. I learned to speak Filipino or Tagalog for the most part in the United States. It was not my first language. So the use of the title for in my language is both a way to regain some degree of competency in the language, but also to signal those who may speak this language. I also use other Filipino languages, that the value of their own words in, frankly, places that would be quite unusual for them to see their own words and language. All right, we'll go quickly to these. My background is in printmaking. For many folks, that's what I do, and I'm very fortunate to have been exposed to printmaking, and much of the work I do is layered around, is centered around this idea of layering, which is very much central to printmaking, and in my case, storytelling. So this work is Dante Waiting for the Number 7. It's a young person that I grew up with in Columbia City. This one is Fatima of Rainier Valley. My exposure to the name Fatima first is in the Hispano-Filipino context. It's not an unusual name to have. And then in Seattle, Fatima and Fatima were both names that I encountered from African Americans and also more recent immigrants from East Africa. On the right there is Michael Brown and the Expanding Universe. On the middle there, forgive me if I forget the title for that one. And then on the right is Joaquin. This is an installation of holographs, a large installation, which is related to the movements that I've been more or less, I suppose you could say, performing in the last couple of years. I'm not sure if I have the images there. So when you see my hand gestures and have movements, part of the study are tied to these prints. Self-portrait. I did a residency in Murcia in Spain immediately after, or actually during COVID. There's a lot of text here, but the text is related to the work which I will read. The language for this exhibit came from that residency, where I had 3 months to think about. Frankly, at the time while I was making work, as you can imagine, we were all quite in a place during COVID. In this little village, in fact, 5 to 10 people were passing away, dying from COVID, almost, I would say, monthly. So the proximity modifier number 49, which is the exhibit here, investigates our presumed capacity to hold multiple ideas, including contradictory concepts, while considering our proximity to intended meanings. There's not enough time to go to talk about where that goes, but I will say one of the reasons for that is myself being in a place where, or the country that essentially colonized my home country, my birthplace, the Philippines, for 330 some years. And the complexity, the reality of being familiar with the culture, of being, in fact, quite comfortable in that culture, where I come from a place of, if you will, to a degree of rebellion, of decolonizing, of thinking about who we are deeply in ancestral knowledge and what have you. And here you are in a place that, for a range of reasons, gives you comfort and actually is feeding the work that you're doing at the time. I'm not saying this is the course each time, every time, but during that time, it's something that I really had to think about. I also have had conversations with other artists from different parts of the world where we go to the, if you will, colonizing country, and we have to address that familiarity, that part that is actually who we are now, why we are, in fact, in my case, why I am a fully Asian American with the name Romson Regarde Bustillo. And to start thinking about other ways to process that, to think about other ways to perhaps, I don't want to simplify things, but to move away from the conversation of trauma to some degree. All right. So, what happened here? So this image here, I've been dancing for a really long time. As a young person on Mindanao, we often did what is referred to as ethnic dances. And I say that because we were not necessarily the group that come from the group that did these performances. As what happens in many diasporas, in countries that are multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, we often become, our idea of our identity is more macro. And for me, this started on the island, where my family is a Bisaya family that was in an environment that included Muslim Filipinos, Moro, Lumad, and Native Filipinos, and this became part also of our cultural experiences, which is distinct from identity, and it's something that continues here in the United States. Though there are many cultural experiences that, at this stage, is not part of our identity, but part of our cultural experience. The one on the right, by the way, is me in Oaxaca. This is, to a degree, this is my attempt at allyship. The idea of gentrification is, at this point, near universal. So here in Oaxaca, many of the local indigenous people sometimes are beginning to be displaced by things like tourism and investment. The sound, if you here at Jack Straw I was able to work on, to listen to carefully, to really dig into the technical part of sound art, originates from this piece from that residency in Murcia, Spain. So I'll just play it briefly here. The instruments, by the way, were tin cans, olive oil cans, and random other aluminum found objects that I hung to emulate an instrument called an agong, or a set of instruments that originates from insular Southeast Asia. I believe in some places on the peninsula it also exists, but in the Philippines, it is now primarily practiced by the Muru community and the Lumad, or indigenous tribal communities. This is one of the images that you will see in the work. You will see me with movements and expressions and hand gestures, flickering, and that language there is in Catalan, and it also is reflective of the struggle for people to find housing in different parts of the world because of gentrification, because of the challenges of income disparity. And then these are just quick images of the places where we bring the artwork outside of the, should we say, established settings. The image on the right is an intervention at Bilbao, at Fig Bilbao, which is an exhibition on paper, and that is the primary image that you see in the installation here at Jack Straw, manipulated, of course. The image on the left is a burial jar, which is part of the research and direction of my present work. We'll just go through some of these images quickly. If you want to have a question about them, they're very much a reflection of the work I've done, and the iterations that are of performances that are tied, interventions that are tied to the work here. The one on the left is me visiting some, well, they're referred to as bulols, deities for harvest that are at the Museum of Anthropology in Barcelona, Spain. That is my brother performing at one of our pieces. This is in here. I was thinking, why did I put it in? I could not remember. I could not remember. And then I realized the reason, then I just very recently, as in maybe like seconds ago, the idea of chance and how we think about how things influence us. And this is just by chance. I was in Turkey during the Tashkim protests. Just very much by chance. I was passing through, and there was something about the way people engaged to get each other's attention that really stuck with me. Their passion, and I'm still to this day processing that experience. But I think of that when I'm trying to get a message through to a large audience. These are some other artists around the world that have touched me deeply. This is a group called Regarde in Indonesia, in Jakarta. Architecture plays in the work. This is from a building in Bali. And then within the work, there is a glass piece to the left on top of folded malongs or patajongs, the wearables that I'm wearing now, made during my most recent residency at the Museum of Glass. And I bring this, I end with this work in that my ability to speak about work, I am very clear is somewhat limited. Sometimes we're asked to talk about, oftentimes we talk about our work, and you see me here. I'm more often than not hesitant to do it, frankly, because my level of concentration can sometimes go off in a different place. So I've been desperately trying from the very beginning, and more so in recent times, to make as many kinds of ways to express what I want to express, whether it has to do with finding our place in the present times, which are, I cannot say is more challenging in the past. If when we think about what our ancestors went through and how it managed to, whatever they went through, we managed to be here. I'm comforted by the fact that there's another side to it, but I'm not quite sure how to vocalize that sometimes. So I'm working on different ways to do that, and one of the ways in recent times are these vessels that are both funerary vessels. They're called burial jars, and also truth vessels. So in many ways, the installation that I've been making in the last couple of years are very much tied to this idea of what is the truth, and what things are buried, and in how is burial and things in the past interpreted in other cultures. So in really broad sense, in many cultures in Southeast Asia, including the Philippines, the dead don't die. They just don't, right? But that also means that the part of us that is good and bad are always with us, and they're present. So how do we store things? How do we look at each other? And what are ways for us to maintain some degree of moving forward? So that's the talk. Mm-hmm. That's the talk. Anyone has any questions? That was longer than I thought. But if anyone has any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll finish it up because it's hot in here. Yeah? All right.
What is the size about this? Looks really big. Is it, or is it?
It's and my sense, it's about the size of this shadow mask. Yeah, it's about the size of the shadow mask. Yeah, and within, I do want to point out that the iconography and the motifs in the artwork here are able to be read by certain groups. They're not necessarily just, and that's part of this piece. I no longer own this piece. This piece was purchased by the University of Washington, SU. And the idea behind the Emerald Truth in this particular piece, but certainly the series Truth Vessels, is who is also able to see more immediately or interpret something as true. For some folks, which there's a certain degree of legitimacy to it, it's an aesthetically beautiful thing. For others, it has another value. For me, it's continuity. So it's something that I don't know if I need to end with this, but one of the things that I feel very strongly is that my cultural references, as much as anyone else's cultural references, is able to communicate, to contribute, to elucidate, to speak of things of the here and now. So this series is speaking of the here and now, and is reflective of our current times, with the idea that I would not be able to do it without the generations before me.
Can you talk about your residency at the Museum of Glass and what it entails?
Yes, the Museum of Glass allows or allowed me. I will speak specifically from my experiences, to really push the boundary of the physical form of my work. So my goal at the Museum of Glass was to create designs and forms that I could build on. So for example, when you see this piece here, the amazing team at the Museum of Glass allowed me to make this form. I am not a glass artist in the sense that I don't have the background in glass. But this idea of transparency was very clear to me. The ability for this team to create size that not one person can make, you need a team to make this, was the reason I landed there. So the residency allows you to make shapes and forms that you would not be able to do otherwise, with or without a glass background.
How much time do you have to
I had,
explore there?
in my case, I had 3 full 8-hour days, I believe. Might have been 7. And then I had other funding to come back and do 3 more other days. So I was so inspired and so supported that I came back separate from the official residency, found funding to continue this work. And so what you see here is the culmination of almost a year of work, if not over a year of work. I should say over a year of work. What came out of the residency was the glass form without any of the etching, was the top form without the etching and without the what we call cold working. So I was also very fortunate to have a residency at Pilchuck, which primarily was vitreography, which is printing on glass, and also included access to the cold working space so that you can manipulate and carve the glass. It's very much related to the residency here. I had a vision about sound, about recording, about some degree of permanency. You know, if I upload my sound, the poems that we recorded, it will be out there, right? It will be so many people will be able to access it. But I did not have the tool. So it's very closely related to my residency at Jack Straw. These residencies allow you to push your work further, right? Which is the reality of art making, right? How do you push it further? Sometimes you push it further alone. Sometimes you push it further with technical assistance. Sometimes you push it further because you're at a residency and you meet someone and you have that dialogue that you would never have had, you know, from some other part of the world. Just the presentation alone of people's work at Pilchuck, for example, was incredibly beneficial because, you know, the short of it is artists, oftentimes, I will say, you know, we believe we're geniuses in our own space, right? In our studio, we are brilliant. But that brilliance really is within our space, and you have to be challenged. You have, you know, you won't know until you're challenged half the time. So that residency challenged me to think about what I could make. I will say I came there with a very specific idea, and I knew that idea required assistance, and they were just phenomenal, as much as the technicians here at Jack Straw. That was long-winded, but that's my answer. That's a good question. That's a really good question. I don't know if, yeah, Levi did mention it. The applications are open now for this residency, and I believe for the museum, they are also opening in the next month or so. But check out their website, the Museum of Glass. Anyone else? Thank you. That's a good question.
Good answer.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Salamat. Gracias. Somebody turn off that camera so I can take this off.